So bearing in mind, in some ways, there's not that much difference between what you need to do when you're looking at goods and material suppliers versus services suppliers. But when we look at the differences that do exist, services suppliers being more people-centric and maybe more spread out, maybe less depth in the supply chain. Is there any particular advice that you would give to companies just at a very top level when they're trying to address diversity and ESG within their services supply chain specifically?
You mean where they really only buy services?
Yeah, so for example, if you look at some banks, for example, okay, they might spend lots of money on newspapers or facilities management, for example, or I don't know, certain types of things that they will buy, computers, phones. They will have a massive proportion of their spend that is on services, and it's just really looking at it in that specific scenario of where, even if it's a company that buys lots of materials and goods and lots of services, are there any things that you think they need to particularly take into consideration when they're looking at those services suppliers?
Well, I think having an open tender, don't just focus on the few suppliers you've been working with the past years. One of the things I also recommend, and obviously it's something that is not very well received all the time, is don't just put everything on price, because sometimes there are cases where you have maybe a higher price, but what you get from that supplier is 10 times more than from a supplier that has a lower price. So I think that's very important to understand how much are you weighting what in your tender, and and be open for any business. And if they have a pitch and they don't deliver, then they don't deliver. But if they have a pitch and they deliver great, then it might be something you need to look at.
Yeah, and ultimately, if they have a pitch and they don't deliver, you're probably not going to use them again. But ultimately, it comes down to having visibility of that supply chain, being open, I think that's some very sound advice.